have to be. Yeah, we passed the cop back there, but he's not following us. Hallelujah. He didn't come. Some other thoughts I have about the MT10 now that I've spent a significant amount of time on it in all conditions, fast sweepers, tight technical, long distance. Like right now I've got not using my hand because it's got cruise control, hallelujah, like my glove. These are holy gloves. They keep me extra protected. It's a very ornery, I don't want to say ornery, but it's just it's a very gnarly bike as far as the power, the way the power hits. It's just extremely it's extremely gnarly the way the power hits. Not as refined as the Aprilia. The Aprilia feels a little more sophisticated, a little more like a little more polished, a little more velvety. It's still, the Aprilia is still a wild ride, and it will knock you over the head with the acceleration. The acceleration on the Aprilia is like a level up from this. You know, it's really freaking fast when the Aprilia gets on the pipe right off of idle, and it just takes your breath away. This is a scaled down version of that. It will take your breath away, but it doesn't hit as hard as the Aprilia, but it hits hard enough. It is a worthy substitute for an Aprilia. It is a very powerful, gnarly bike. It will wheelie in the first 3 gears. It will lift the front wheel up in the first 3 gears. It will power wheelie on demand. Now this bike is flashed, and it has the expansion chamber / mid pipe cat delete, and it's got either a Bryn tune or a more Mafia tune. Either tune, any tune you put on this bike will be fine, as long as you get rid of the catalytic converter. I'll set it for 70. It's so nice having cruise control on these long distance rides. The other thing is the comfort. The comfort of this bike is on par with the Aprilia. Aprilia is extremely comfortable. Like the seat on the Aprilia will not cause your butt any discomfort, even if you ride the Aprilia Tuono all day long, right? And your wrists. Your wrists will not, your wrists might feel a little something after a day on the Aprilia because it is a more aggressive seating position than this. I have 20mm risers on my Aprilia, so my wrist is very comfortable. After a day, I don't experience any wrist fatigue. On this, there is no wrist fatigue at all in its stock setup. You don't have to change anything on this. Nothing. It is completely comfortable. The seat on this is completely comfortable after a day of riding. You do not have to fidget around or wish you had a comfort seat on the MT10. extremely comfortable after a full day of riding. So I will say, as far as comfort goes, the MT10 is an extremely comfortable motorcycle. You don't sit on it and you don't sit deep in it. It's just the perfect middle ground between being perched on top and seating down in it. I rode Cam's Z900 yesterday, and that bike, I was down inside of it. I felt like I was on I was sitting on down inside of it. The tank was up in front of me. I was just down in there. I felt like the bars were way up in front of me, and it works on that bike. And then conversely, there's bikes where you're perched up on top, like I rode Jake's RSV4 yesterday, and on that bike you're perched up on top of it, and everything is down below you as you're operating the bars and doing everything. This bike is a perfect middle ground between being perched up on it and being set down in it. I love it. I love the seating position of this bike and the comfort of it. The pegs are slightly lower than what I'm used to. On the Tuono, the pegs are up pretty high, and you feel like you're on a race-inspired motorcycle. On this, you feel like you're on a street bike. Pegs are very low, but really comfortable. Again, for day-long riding, your legs are not sore or cramped at all. So no soreness in your butt, no soreness in your legs, no soreness in your wrists on the MT10. I give it 2 thumbs up for comfort. Ant-Man Moto approved.
And it is right about now I wanted to switch to a voiceover because I just wanted to get my thoughts together a little better than I had them when I originally recorded this. At the time, I was going through some pretty major kind of things with my Aprilia, at least major to me at the time, and I was speaking on it, and the emotions of the moment, I fear, were probably a little harsh looking back on it, so I wanted to record this voiceover now that I'm calmer and everything is behind me, to kind of a little more accurately describe my ownership experience with the Aprilia as of late. But I did want to finish with the MT10 by saying that the vibrations on the MT10 are very low. There's like no buzziness at your fingertips or at your hands that fatigue you over a day of riding. It's minimal, the vibes that are there. You want it to vibrate a little bit so you know you're riding, something. You're riding a real machine. And it gives you that perfect amount of vibration without overwhelming you and making your hands tingle and numb. And that's very similar with the Aprilia. Actually, the Aprilia is very smooth now that I've put the Gabbro tune on it. It's smoothed out some of its vibiness. I kind of would like a little of the vibes back, but it's okay because it's just so brutally fast now that it just, I don't have time to think about vibrations when the thing is just hurling you down the road like you're riding a Patriot missile, literally, with handlebars. So heat on the MT10, not a factor. The heat on an Aprilia you will start to feel it if you're sitting in traffic, but if you're moving, the heat on the Aprilia is also minimal. My Aprilia runs probably right around 200 degrees on average. When I'm sitting in traffic, it'll get as hot as like maybe 220. And sometimes when I'm humming along and I'm up in the mountains, it'll read as low as like 180, or even in the 170s. So I think since I got the tune on my Aprilia, it's much better temperature-wise. The wind on the MT10 is very quiet because it has a low windscreen. You don't get that buffeting, rowdy, rambunctious air when you're riding, and the ride on the MT10 is very calm and, to me, very peaceful. Now, of course, if you're trying to do 150 plus mile an hour, you're going to have problems holding on, and it's going to probably be a little violent for you. But I'd say at anything between 50 and 100 and low hundreds, 110 mile an hour, you're fine with this bike set up as it is stock. You don't have to worry about getting a bigger screen or anything like that. I think it's perfect the way it is with the tiny screen. So how do I compare the two? How do I compare this MT10 to my Tuono? Well, if I just look at it from different categories like the suspension, the Aprilia Tuono factory with the EC2 electronic Öhlins front and rear is going to win, because it's a superior suspension to what the MT10 has. And it's doing that thing where it's calculating every millisecond that you're doing something, and it's changing things, and it's adjusting the ride and the pitch and the yaw and all these terms that it's calculating, and you can feel it when you ride. The Aprilia has got a very capable suspension on it, and it wins compared to the MT10, but the MT10 can always be improved. You can always put different springs in it, get the front end set up, with some thicker springs and different valves, and, get a better shock in the back. And, you'll be right there with the Tuono, which I believe Dave has done to this one. He's definitely had some suspension work done, because the thing was rock solid. If I were to compare the engines, well, the Aprilia V4 motor to me is just the best motor in motorcycling. I can't compare. I mean, the MT10 cross plane crank is very close because it's got that character. It kind of sounds like a V4 or like a gnarly twin, and I like that about the cross plane crank, but I still think the V4 it's addicting, that motor. So the engines are both full of character, but the Aprilia motor has a bit more horsepower also. I think it makes 175 horsepower, where this bike makes, I think it's like around 150 or something like that. So the Aprilia's got it beat in horsepower. As far as torque, the MT in MT10 stands for Masters of Torque. I don't know if you knew that, but I learned that doing research for this video, and it has plenty of torque. It's named like that appropriately because that's what it does. It just gives you immediate thrust pretty much from anywhere in the rev range. The Tuono does the same thing. Especially the way I have mine set up with the stage 3 tune, and I've changed my gearing to make the gearing a little shorter. So, stock out of the box, I'd say the MT10 probably hits you a little more immediately with the torque than the Aprilia does, but the Aprilia builds its torque almost as rapidly and more so. So if you just want, if you're just looking at which one makes the superior amount of torque, the Aprilia wins. But the MT10 is close. It's really close in how it feels, and if you rode it alone by itself, it would be more than enough. So, and then also, like I said, the handling, suspension / handling, they both handle great, but the Aprilia has the electronic stuff, so it's got a bit of an advantage, and it's got an electronic steering dampener as well. The looks of both bikes, that's a subjective thing. I like the way the Aprilia looks. I think that the MT10 looks a bit like a praying mantis in the front. If you look at a praying mantis's head and then look at the front of the MT10, they're strikingly similar. And you might like the praying mantis look. I myself like the look that the Tuono gives. Some people call the Tuono dated. It's looked like that for a long time. But it did have a facelift back in 2021. And, I think it is up to date as far as the looks department goes, especially with the LED lights in the front. But the MT10 is a very stunning looking machine, so it really depends on what you prefer. The cost of both bikes, the MT10 in the SP version, which is the version I would recommend, is $17,199. This particular MT10 is not an SP, so its MSRP is even lower. But the SP is $17,199, and that comes with Öhlins front and rear, which I think is more than worth it to pay that premium price. Comparatively, the Tuono, and I'm talking the factory, is $19,599 for Aprilia Tuono factory. So it's just under $20,000, and you get the smart suspension, the electronic Öhlins front and rear. So you're going to pay a couple of thousand more for the Aprilia, you know, but you are getting a faster, I think, more bespoke bike than the MT. You know, Aprilias are rare and they're cool and you don't see them all the time. I don't know, I just think there's something cool about Aprilia owners, that they just get it. You know, to own an Aprilia, you just have to get it, and you have to know that there's going to be some drawbacks to owning it as well, which is what we'll touch on now, and that is the running cost of both bikes. The main factor you have to look at in either one of these bikes, in these high performance super nakeds, is what are the valve service intervals, because you have to get your valves checked in order to keep the engine from grenading and having problems. Well, for the Tuono, your valve checks are recommended every 12,500 miles. And for the MT10, it's more than double that. You can go 26,000 miles on your MT10 before you have to worry about getting the valves checked. I think that's a pretty huge difference between the two. And I'll tell you, with the Aprilia Tuono, and I have first-hand experience with this, and this is why my bike was not in this video, is because my valves had gotten tight on the exhaust side of one of my cylinders, and cylinder number 3, and it caused some damage to the head. So I actually had to replace a head on my V4 motor, and a head is about $1,000 just for that part. And then you figure the labor for the they did a valve adjustment plus fluids plus parts and labor, and it was a substantial amount of money to get the bike fixed. And the thing that really sucked about it is that I had had my bike serviced just last year at 12,000 miles, which is the recommended, you know, mileage for valve checks. And I got it back from that service and everything was fine. Now I've done 4 track days since then, plus, you know, I've done some pretty hard mountain riding, but I had only accrued 8,000 miles since that last service that I did last year. And in that time, the valves had tightened up enough based on the type of riding I do to cause damage to the head. So what I was told by the mechanic is I didn't do anything wrong, but you just have to check the valves more frequently if you're going to ride it hard. So that to me is a pretty major issue when it comes to Aprilia, and something that you should know going into it. If you're buying an Aprilia Tuono and you're not going to track it and you're just going to ride it as a street bike, then you are absolutely fine to go 12,500 miles for valve checks. You're not in any danger of having any problem. But if you're going to ride your Tuono hard, if you're going to take it to the track and you're an intermediate rider, level rider, or faster, and you're going to be doing multiple track days, you are going to need to check your valves more often than the 12,500 miles. And the cost to check your valves is about $1,200 a pop. So if you're checking them, if you're riding your bike hard and checking them every 6,000 miles, that's $1,200 you're spending per check, unless you do it yourself. If you do it yourself and you're mechanically inclined, you can obviously save some money, but it's still something you're going to want to check, pretty regularly if you're riding your bike hard. With the MT10, I've heard of some random engine failures here and there, but for the most part, you don't have to worry about the valves on an MT10. You can do 4 or 5 track days. You can ride it hard in the mountains. You can ride the hell out of the thing, and it's not going to cause any damage to the heads unless you're just doing some extreme stunt stuff. So I think that's probably one of the biggest differences you have to factor in when you're looking at this bike versus an Aprilia Tuono. This bike, you're not going to have to really think about the valves much. You just put gas in it, change the oil, and ride it. Keep tires on it, keep your chain lubed, and ride it. With the Aprilia, if you're tracking it and you're riding it hard, once you get to the 5 to 5,500 mile mark, you're going to have to start thinking about getting your valves checked rather than 12,500 miles. And that's just the truth about this motor. So I think with that being the truth and that being the case, and you can check with your Aprilia mechanic and ask them if what I'm saying is true. But if they're honest, they're gonna tell you it's true. You should be checking your valves more often than 12,500 miles on your Tuono if you're riding the bike hard, doing track days, and you ride like a maniac like I do. So, that is something to be considered, and the MT10 definitely shines in that department. People who buy Aprilias are, we kind of know it's an Italian bike. We're going to have to spend a little bit more, and we're aware of that fact. But you don't want to have to spend thousands of dollars to replace a head. You just don't want to have to do that. So something you need to factor in and consider. They both shred tires. I know they do, because my Aprilia Tuono goes through a rear tire in about 2,000 miles just because of all the power and torque. So I would say in tires, if you get this or the Tuono, you're going to be burning up some tires. And if you ride hard, you'll go through a rear in probably a couple of thousand miles. You'll go through a front in maybe 4,000 or 5,000 miles. But I gotta say, I really liked the MT. In summing it up, I really liked the MT10. It's a really fun bike filled with character. But I will say, I think it's missing that certain something that the Aprilia Tuono has. The Aprilia Tuono has, it just has a character to it and a feel from the moment you start it till the moment you click it in gear and go through the gears. You can tell you're riding a special machine. So I still am going to say the Aprilia wins against the MT10, but the MT10 is an easy bike to live with, and it's really close to what the Aprilia is. Thanks a lot, Cam. He just cut off my kill switch. Yep. Thanks a lot, Cammy. But yeah, that's my thoughts about the MT10. It's a great bike. It's very capable, low maintenance costs, a ton of fun, a ton of torque, and it'll put a smile on your face big time. So, if you're looking for a bike that is comfortable and fast and capable of pretty much anything except for off-road, an MT10 is for you. If you like spirited street riding and you like to just, feel that feeling of just gobs of torque, the MT10 is your bike. And it comes at a very reasonable price for the stock, for the base model. I think it's like, 14 maybe. And for the SP, it's $17,199. You can't beat it. So, 2 thumbs up for the MT10. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Dave's Garage, for letting me ride your bike. You are awesome. Check out his channel if you're not subscribed. And thank you again for watching. I'm going to go back to regular sound and close this bad boy out. I'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Ant-Man Moto. Peace. Oh, shit. That would have been a hell of a way to end the video. Ant-Man Moto. Peace. Bam. Jesus.